the first time we've ever really addressed this as a family, as far as sharing Rosa's story. Brian reached out to me via I can't even talk, I'm so nervous, Facebook Messenger. And I was suspicious at first because the man they believe killed my sister is behind bars for other crimes, but they don't have enough evidence to convict him. We were hoping for a conviction one day. They did find her remains. I did write a little thing about her because this is so heavy. All your stories matter. These people matter. Your family matters. No one ever said that. No one ever said that. Sometimes I think that it's because, like, in our family, my sister wasn't prominent in society. She was married to a drug addict. He trafficked her. Long story short in that. So people fall through the cracks, and my sister was one of those people. And I just want to read a little about her, who she was, and just go from there. Thank you, Brian, for reaching out to me. I was suspicious at first because her case is cold, and hopefully they have new people in homicide. So they're going to pull open those cold cases and go through the files, but you know, it's been kind of dormant. There's a little piece knowing we have buried her, but they have never convicted him, and I don't think he'll ever walk free again, but you know, we just hope with technology the way that it is now, that her killer will be convicted because he needs to stand trial for what he did. I just want to read about her. This is my sister Laura, her other sister. There were 5 of us, 5 siblings. So just to tell you a little bit about her, she's a beautiful young woman. She was 26 when she was killed. Not just on the outside, but on the inside. She was not a loud person, but she wasn't a wallflower either. She had spirit and sometimes a temper, but a good heart and trusting nature. She was a girly girl. She loved makeup, having her clothes match and her hair, just right. She loved boy bands. She was a fanatic about New Kids on the Block. She used to cover our walls with them, and we'd fight about that because I had to share. Yeah, we all fought about that. She loved beauty pageants, Miss America especially. I believe that was one of her dreams. Her firstborn, the first of her 5 children, she used to put her in those little pageants, and I think it was her way of living her dream. That parents often do that, seeing her girl all dressed up in a pretty dress and a tiara. She was proud. She was proud of all her kids. They were her heart and greatest accomplishment, I think. She had her first child when she was just 14. She was just a child herself. She didn't know how to parent. I believe that her unhealed traumatic childhood, we all kind of had a traumatic childhood, made her vulnerable and searching for a safe place. In that vacuum, she chose men that weren't mature nor safe, men that didn't know how to protect or love wholesomely and sacrificially. Eventually, it cost her life. Over the span of a couple of years, she lost all of her children to the state. They all went with family. The youngest was adopted. I believe that not being able to see her children at some point broke her already. She was already fragile, but it just made her spiral into even darker decisions. The last memory I have of her alive was the spring of 2000. I had given her a ride to her husband's house. They were staying in a little trailer behind his family's home. It had no running water, no electricity, and was cluttered with trash and debris. It didn't seem to faze her. The reality of how she was living didn't faze her. I was 23. She was 25. I pleaded with her that day to come and stay with me and my roommate. I naively invited her husband too. At the time, I didn't know that she had started using, or I didn't think she had started using drugs at that time, but he was, and I didn't know that. All I knew is that she loved him and held on to him as if he was her last lifeline. There were often periods where we wouldn't hear from her. A couple weeks would go by, a month or two. At that point, she lived in Leland. She didn't have a car, so we didn't see her as often even then. This was before cell phones and texting and all that became, more common as it is now. I didn't realize that she was even missing until one day 2 detectives came to my job and showed up and asked questions about the last time I'd seen her. Then some months later, a frantic call from my mom saying that they found her remains. She was found on 421. And I like the lady that said her killer because he doesn't deserve to be named. He had bashed her skull and wrapped her in a blanket and left her by the railroad tracks. It was a numbing time. We were numb. It had not set in that, this was reality and we were living. This was a nightmare. We didn't know the extent of her unhealthy activities. We didn't know how far it had gone. We knew that it wasn't a healthy lifestyle, but we didn't know. We didn't know that her husband was trafficking her for drugs. I didn't know or like him at all, but when you have family members that you don't want to alienate, you try to accept the whole of who they are, and I think that's part of love. Doesn't mean you don't cut them off. You don't cut them off, but you don't just love them the best way you know how. But his part in her death weighs on me because he's still walking free and he knows more than I think than he shares with the police. So we're hoping eventually that we'll get some conviction with technology the way that it is now, that he will confess or they can get enough evidence to convict him. Her death has affected my family and her children on so many ways. Too many to share today. My mother has had her heart broken, and I know it won't be completely healed until the day she sees her in heaven. And my siblings and I feel the void of losing her and believe we'll see her again one day too. I want her to be remembered, not for the short span of time where she lost herself. It's easy to get lost when you have had trauma in your life as a child and it doesn't get healed and there's not a support team. So if you have that, you have family members that, maybe you have family members that your siblings, their siblings or sons or daughters that, and you're still looking for your other child, just remember, if you can, and they're still living a lifestyle that isn't healthy or safe, to just never stop reaching out to them. Never, ever, ever leave the judgment and just never stop. Never, just love them where they're at. I wish that we had conveyed more often that we loved her. I know that she knows we loved her, but you think back on the times when you weren't getting along or just hard times, hard memories. It's a mixed bag of things when you lose someone, especially the way that she died so young. I want her to be remembered for not as a prostitute, because I saw that in the news and I was like, she wasn't, excuse my language, a fucking prostitute. Sorry. She was a person. She was a wife, she was a mother, she was a child, and she was a child of God. Sorry about the F word. So when I think about her and I'm overcome with what might have been her seeing her children, her 5 children, they've all grown into beautiful young adults. She has 1 grandson. I wish you could see how adorable he is. Sometimes I see glimpses of her in them, and their interests and hobbies, even their voices, remind me of her. Ironically, her second oldest daughter is a fashionista and loves beauty pageants, especially Miss America, and even the local ones here in the county. Her two boys, Rosa's two boys, love video games, and one of them is a really good golfer. The oldest is a mother and a digital artist. They all have unique gifts that make me think of her. They are living treasures she left behind that remind me of the good in spite of the grief that I still feel. And so my hope is today that your stories and our stories will somehow give us more hope, that it'll expand, that love is never wasted. Your love is never wasted, and your care is never wasted. And I believe that our loved ones are in a better place. I truly believe that, where God is, and where they get to start a new life, and they're lavishly loved. There's no shortage in heaven. I firmly believe that. And thank you for your time, and thank you, Q. I appreciate you, Brian.